One of the most important things to consider when you're making a game or a movie or any narrative piece of art, really, is a good hook, a great first impression. You never get a second chance at a first impression. Take Grand Theft Auto 5 for instance. First thing that happens is you're robbing a bank with zero context and making a quick getaway. Immediately you know what the game is about, but you still have so many questions. Paper Mario, The Thousand Year Door. First thing that happens is you go to a seedy town to search for a treasure and are immediately ambushed by a clan of weirdos, and immediately you're just dying to know what it all means. And you see some mobsters beat the shit out of two guys in the background, and immediately that tells you everything you need to know about the setting. Mario Sunshine. First thing that happens in this game is you go to fucking jail. Damn. Zelda typically has a knack for first impressions. Ocarina of Time starts with Link having a nightmare about a scary green dude who we presumably know nothing about. Majora's Mask, Link is immediately mugged by a skull kid wearing a freaky mask, and this creepo sends him on a quest to retrieve it. Wind Waker, it starts with this dramatic retelling of the Hero of Time. You innocently use the new telescope your sister gave you and you see a giant bird getting shot at by a pirate ship. Then it drops some girl into the forest. So following in the tradition of great first impressions, how does Twilight Princess start out? Well, it starts by explaining that Link has the honor of riding to Hyrule to offer the Orden shield and sword to the royal family. Then you dick around with some goats. Then you're getting this baby carriage back for this pregnant lady. Then you're following the pregnant lady who walks at a rate of 3 feet per millennia. Then you go fishing. And then some dickhead cat steals your fish. Look at Link's face. You just know that cat is fucking dead. I mean, if that was the case, at least something would be happening. Then for a minute, it looks like it's getting interesting when one of the neighborhood kids runs off into the woods after a monkey and gets captured by some bokoblins. But nope, it just reels right back in before it even got interesting. Then what do? More goats. Yeah. Well, after an eternity of goats and fish and what little there is in between, Link's kinda sorta not really girlfriend Ilia gets angry because he apparently injured his horse Schlieffen by pushing her too hard. Link follows them into the spring when finally something actually happens. These giant assholes come in and kidnap both Ilia and Colin. Link chases after them and stumbles upon a corrupted void. An arm pulls him inside, revealing some freaky shadow beast. Then Link transforms into a wolf and is carried off and imprisoned. Then we're introduced to Midna, this slightly demented yet charmingly insane shadow imp who believes they can help each other out. Now that's how you start a game. Maybe open with that next time, yeah? Alright, look, I understand that you need build-up, that's not lost on me, and it does do good to put things into perspective, but this was literally an hour of goats to get to the point where I was actually interested. This has gotta be Twilight Princess's biggest issue. Even after this ordeal, it takes a long time for Twilight Princess to break free of that exhaustingly sluggish pacing. For the first half of the game, a good chunk of it is so goddamn boring. The first 3 chapters, if you will, are probably the worst thing ever. Each of them require Link to involuntarily transform into a wolf to find tears of light, to bring back a light goddess that can remove the infectious twilight from the area. You also can't fast travel for the first 3 chapters. Of course, that's not exclusive to Twilight Princess, but still, it doesn't help anything. Now you may be wondering to yourself, is it all worth it? Absolutely. There are highlights scattered throughout the first chunk of the game, though they're a bit sparse, but the game takes a dramatic leap in quality as soon as you beat the 3rd dungeon. I'm not going to spoil exactly what happens, but now you can transform into a wolf back and forth on demand, which is very convenient. But at the same time, the story suddenly becomes immensely more interesting. The stakes are raised sharply. The quest becomes more interesting. You find yourself really wanting to go forward to see what happens next. Even the gameplay gets better too. The last few dungeons are the absolute best in the game. But before we get to that, I'm going to try and explain the story again. I kinda lost focus while bitching about how slow the game is, and I apologize for that. So here we go. So the story for most Zelda games can pretty much be summarized quite simply. Ganon is back on his usual bullshit and he's trying to take over the world. He kidnaps Zelda and it's your job to save her and save Hyrule. Now Twilight Princess's story is pretty much that, except with a lot of extra steps. After Link meets Midna, she breaks him free and takes him to Zelda, who explains that Zant, an evil sorcerer from the Twilight Realm, attacked the castle and forced them to surrender. He proceeds to cover Hyrule in perpetual twilight, reducing the citizens purely to spirit forms. Eventually, we learn that he was granted his wicked power by Ganondorf, who was previously held prisoner in the Shadow Realm. So you and Midna set out to remove the Twilight from Hyrule and stop Zant and ultimately Ganon. It's a bit of a morally conflicting story. Midna is also from the Twilight Realm and starts out basically using Link as a means to an end to save her own world, while her general distrust towards the beings of the Light World makes her largely apathetic to it. But slowly Link and Zelda's heroic and selfless exploits make her reconsider. Of all the partners that accompany Link throughout the series, Midna is the one that I like the most, because she's the one with the most personality and the most context. Navi was just a nagging, pestering insect the entire time. Tattle was slightly better because she was kind of sarcastic and cynical. She was like a Diet Coke version of Kazooie. But Midna is an entire character. She changes, she evolves. She's such a tragic character too, but I'd rather not spoil why. You'll just have to play the game for yourself. Twilight Princess characters in general are some of my favorite in the series. You got Malo, this quiet, soft-spoken little 6-year-old kid who opens up a fucking store in Kakariko and complains about how the Hyrule Castle town markets are ripping people off. You got Telma, who leads a band of misfits to help Link defend Hyrule. Then you got Uku, yeah, Uku. Huku? Yuku. Uku, who makes Dead Hand look like Mr. Rogers. You got the Yeti couple that live up in the snowy mansion. You got the postman, who's just the running man from the 64. Even the doctor kinda looks like the dude from the 64. You got the Ganon, who looks like the Ganon from the 64. And they even brought back this little shit. For those of you who watched my Star Fox video a billion years ago, do you guys remember when I suggested that the reason Assault had so much fan service was to apologize to fans who felt they were deceived by the previous Star Fox adventures? Well, I feel like Twilight Princess is in a similar situation. Don't get me wrong, Wind Waker is an amazing game, and even if fans were annoyed by it at the time, it's nowhere near as much of a betrayal as Star Fox Adventures was, but nevertheless, people did complain. They played Majora and Ocarina and they fell in love. They wanted more of that, and instead, they got a boat. So in swoops Twilight Princess to the rescue. We got the horseback riding, we got Saria's song. You got a new version of Death Mountain. And you got my favorite. It's no secret that the game was intended as a return to form, and gameplay-wise it very much is. That's not to say they didn't do anything new. The game added a whole bunch of new mechanics. There's this guy who teaches you all these new sword techniques. You can now swing your sword on horseback, which created a bunch of really epic moments. More than anything else, Twilight Princess is a game about tools. Remember the shitty iron boots from Ocarina of Time? Well, now you can whip them on with one button, and use them to walk on this magnetic floor.
Yeah, bitch! Magnets! Oh!
You know how in Ocarina and Majora you got the fire arrows and the ice arrows? You know what's better than that? Bomb arrows. That's not a fucking joke, by the way. I'm serious. That's in the game. Now tell me, what could possibly be better than a hook shot? 2 hook shots. That's the real shit. They got completely new stuff too. You can ride this oversized Beyblade, you got the fucking magic rod that lets you possess giant statues to do your bidding, and of course you got the wolf, which, even though it was an inconvenience for the first half of the game, actually turns out to be pretty cool. He runs way faster and his attacks are really awesome. You remember how in Ocarina of Time, to get a Poe soul, you had to kill a Poe and catch their soul in a bottle? Well, in Twilight Princess, you turn into a wolf and use your wolf senses to see them, at which point you knock them to the ground and rip their fucking souls out of their chest with your mouth. That's how you kill a Poe. I'm telling you, the Poe merchant is so hot right now. You can't tell because of the cloak, but trust me. The game is divided into dungeons, naturally. Confirmed, it's Zelda. I think my favorite dungeon would probably have to be the Snowy Mansion. This one's so great because it's not some mystical sacred building, it's just a giant mansion where a couple of giant Sasquatch Gorons live. The wife sends you running around the mansion in search of a key, but every chest you open just contains food, and this guy straight up takes it from you and throws it in his soup. But then he lets you eat as much as you want. It's awesome. My next favorite one would probably be the Temple of Time, which in this game is an actual temple. As I mentioned earlier, the magic rod allows you to possess giant statues, and that's the gimmick of the whole dungeon. It kicks ass. Each dungeon has a boss fight too, and this one is probably my favorite. You knock this giant spider over and make a giant statue punch him right in the stomach. It's the most satisfying thing in the world. On a visual level, the game is awesome. It was supposedly made using a modified Wind Waker engine. That might seem surprising at first, but after thinking about it, it makes a lot more sense. The game's visual style is clearly very different, but there are certain animations that seem more cartoony, which are at odds with the more realistic models and textures. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it also handles like Wind Waker. But otherwise, the visuals are much darker and more gritty, which is good and bad. It makes sense given the game's intention of being the opposite of Wind Waker, but a lot of the game has this very monochromatic and washed out hue, which is very much at odds with any Zelda game I've played before or since. It also kinda hurts your eyes after a while. There's no question that the game is trying to be gritty. I mean, check it out, it's rated T, for teenagers. For edgy, black-haired, wrist-slitting teenagers. The subject matter of the game is also much more brutal and tragic than many of the other Zelda titles. It's kinda like Majora's Mask, but with much less subtlety, which is fine. I mean, think about it, most of the fans of the older Zelda titles would have been in their teens or even their young adulthood by the time this came out, which means a lot of them would probably appreciate a grittier take on Zelda. I know I do. Now, does the game remind you of Shadow of the Colossus? No? Okay, well how about now? I already spoke about the music and how it redid a lot of the songs from the previous games, but the new songs are also pretty great. They even added a new Hyrule Field theme. Then you have this awesome spaghetti western song for when you march through this town and shoot enemies off balconies and shit. Then you have this, one of my favorite musical pieces in any video game ever made. This song can only be described as the musical embodiment of the word serenity. The beginning to Twilight Princess is slow and frustrating, but it's imperative that you understand what you're fighting for. The reward for pushing through the boring stuff is a brilliant experience. I have no problem saying Twilight Princess is a masterpiece. It might not be the best 3D Zelda game, but it is very special and something every single person should play. I have no problem recommending it. That is, the GameCube version. The Wii version is the worst game ever made.